Video game journalists clearly do not represent gamers anymore, yet we continue to see modern slop churned out by these large companies because their developers are also activists. So it creates one massive echo chamber, yet when they go to sell a product, well, nobody wants to buy it. And now PC Gamer is coming out and defending the latest modern flop Highguard, saying it wasn't actually a flop, it didn't deserve all of the backlash, and that it actually is a good game. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. The media will constantly come up with a reason to say something is a success, even if it is a failure, because they need to push an agenda. They do not care about the truth, they do not care about the facts, and they do not care about learning from their mistakes. You would think that after so many bad articles being written and after so much criticism, that journos would take a step back and go, you know what, maybe it's time we change our ways and we try to figure out what it is that gamers are actually looking for, as our outlets are dying, and in the next month or two we're not going to have jobs unless we bring people into our website. Same goes for developers. They should actually listen to the feedback that we give them, but they don't. They double, triple, and quadruple down because they just care that the agenda they want pushed is being pushed. And with Highguard, it truly was a modern game. It wasn't the heaviest in terms of a narrative when you actually get into the title, but clearly this was put on a pedestal by the industry. We've seen ex-developers come out and say that everybody who gave it a shot loved it and said this is like lightning in a bottle and this is going to be the next major game. We saw Jeff Keighley say the same thing. We are seeing the media damage controlling and saying it deserved more of a chance, but you can sit here and whine and cry all day that your game didn't do good, but it's your fault it didn't do good. Sure, I think that every single game is allowed to exist, but that doesn't mean that we can't criticize it, and this title truly did deserve it. The gameplay was really mediocre. The maps were, I think they would be okay if we were talking about 5v5 from the get-go, but by the time they added 5v5, I wasn't going to re-download it. I wasn't going to play it again. I played it once, good enough for me. The fact that they left 5v5 out at release was a wild choice. They didn't really have a lot of cool skins. Like, it just didn't feel like a completed experience. It felt like it should have been in early access and released in a year when they polished it up and actually took our feedback into account, but they didn't do that. And so they reaped the consequences of their own actions, and now they're upset over it. But PC Gamer saying that it's surprising to hear how expectant the Highguard studio was before launch. Despite running no public playtests, the mood ahead of the Game Awards reveal was that the competitive shooter would likely be a major hit, according to a former employee. It's not any particular feature of Highguard that makes me think the confidence was misplaced. It's just the fact that most new shooters aren't massive hits. Why did anyone get the idea? There are sure things. As pointlessly rabid as the social media response to Highguard has been, I don't think the internet's recreational cruelty is to blame for the modest player base. I don't think any deep analysis at all is required to understand why Highguard isn't a huge hit. It's a decent game. Morgan gave it a 65% in his review, but even if it had been a great game, it wouldn't necessarily have blown up like Arc Raiders, because most games don't. Now, by this point in the article, you might be saying to yourself, oh, they're actually being a little bit critical. They're not coming out and saying you're an ist or a phobe for not playing this game. But the problem is that they clearly are ignoring facts in order to push their agenda. Because, yes, I understand that there are games that come out, they don't have insane budgets. They don't need to be massive successes with 1 million players in game in order for them to be considered wins for their studios, but this article is completely missing the point that the cost of the game matters a lot, and it is clearly a flop compared to the costs induced. We are talking about a game that I consider coming from a AAA studio, given the fact that they have ex developers who worked on massive hits like Apex Legends and Titanfall. This is coming from the equivalent of a AAA studio, even if you've never heard of them before, even if this is their first major experience. You clearly can tell that it had a decent budget, if not a massive budget, at the very least, because they paid for a spot at the Game Awards, meaning they paid like $1 million. Okay? Do you think an indie team could pay $1 million? Do you think a tiny team could pay $1 million? Absolutely not. Most of the indie games we see at the Game Awards were actually slots given by the organization. They do occasionally give a slot here or there because they do know that indies do pretty good and people like to see indies. But in this case, they had to pay for the time that their game was shown on screen. If you look at something like Hollywood, there are indie movies that are made on a very tiny budget, and then they sell a few million tickets, which, yes, that could be considered a success. But the problem with that is the fact that this game didn't have an upfront cost. So, sure, their player count might have hit 97,000 in the first 2 hours that it released, but they didn't make any money off of those downloads. It's not like those 97,000 players had to pay $40 to get into game or even $20 to get into the game. So there was no cost of entry, which I do generally think can help games, but in this case, it didn't make them any money. And so when we are talking about a game that is not a title that has an upfront cost, plus clearly they didn't sell a lot of skins, and then you top all of that off with the fact that it lost 96% of its player base in 2 weeks. Yeah, you know this game is absolutely screwed. This is a behemoth flop. And so PC gamers over here coping and seething over that fact. I mean, they're even getting community noted. It says PC Gamer frames Highguard as an artistic success. However, with a 98% player base drop off in days and a current player base of around 2.4k daily, calling this not a flop is bold creative writing. Yeah, they just want to leave out certain facts within this conversation because it wouldn't make for a better headline. You know, technically, Highguard is a flop, but I personally believe it's not because I like the game. We get it. You got into the experience. You spent a bit of money, but now you're getting roasted, and rightfully so. Just when I didn't think PC Gamer could lose any more credibility, they tweet this and prove they can, kicking sand at them. Community note W. Game journos be trolling and gaslighting, and yeah, they're desperate for clicks, they're desperate for attention, and they're finally getting some, but, well, it's not positive, that's for sure. Yes, it fucking did. Shit like this is why people don't like or trust games journals. You would think that the journos would want to try to do better, that they would actually strive to grow and to adapt and learn, but they never do. How are you so consistently and constantly wrong? It's like they look at the general sentiment on social media and then they write the complete opposite. They ask Chat GPT to make an opposite day article and then they edit it a little bit and put it up. 16 days and firing everyone isn't a flop. Amazing journalism, guys. Yeah, this is also a very good point, is that if your game is successful, why are you laying off virtually everybody? We know that they're keeping a core team of developers, but those devs must just be doing maintenance and keeping an eye on the servers. Other than that, there's nobody working on this game anymore. Has anyone actually heard of any of the games they quoted? Yeah, I think that this is so funny. I've heard of 2 of these games. I've never played them and I've never actually talked to anybody that played them, but they talk about how cool new shooters of every variety release every year, and the default state of all of them, no matter how good they are or how much money was spent to develop them, is not millions of players. Here are some examples. examples. Straftat, Echo Point Nova, Mycopunk, Enlisted, Fragpunk, and Quake Champions. I've heard of Quake Champions and I've heard of Fragpunk. Besides that, never heard of the others. Highguard didn't flop. Almost all of the developers at the studio were fired. Struggles hit over 2 to 3K players daily. Most players who tried it said it's okay, but not enough to stand out in a sea of competition. I can understand how you think it's successful. Highguard didn't flop, and the community note simply said Highguard flopped. So yeah, we're going to see a lot of articles like this releasing over the next couple of days, and then Highguard's just going to fade into obscurity. Nobody's really going to be talking about it anymore until they announce the servers are shut down. Then everyone will meme on it, and then it will be dead. So I'll be keeping an eye on the journos articles on this game, but they are coping and seething because they have another modern audience failure under their belts. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.